In this video, we're going to take our foundation sketch and create a nice strong outline based on it. In the previous video, I had lowered the opacity for my foundation sketch, and now on a new layer, I'm going to start outlining and emphasizing certain aspects and features. Essentially what I'm doing is I'm cleaning up the roughness from my foundation sketch. I'm using darker lines to now start adding in form and kind of really bringing out the character, essentially cleaning it up. Now to get these nice thick dark strokes, I did increase the opacity and flow again. And I'm always opening up the brush window to adjust my dual brush. Sometimes if I want thicker lines, I want to decrease the spacing. Now I'm starting with painting in and outlining the eyes first because I want to give it the most attention and detail. And here's another trick that I like to do. When I'm working, I specifically like to name and label my layers. This is very important. You can just click on the text over there and rename your layer. You can also right-click on your layer and select a color. In this case, I'm going to use yellow. This is also really easy for quickly finding different layers. Especially can become very chaotic when you have so many different ones that you're trying to keep track of. I use the color method often, especially when I'm, doing some heavy-duty painting with a lot of detail. And I also like to label it. It depends on what your preference is. I'm working on something quite simple in this case, so I don't need to go into too much detail with labeling and colors. But if you like it, it's an option that's there and available for you to use. Now on a new layer with the properties changed to multiply, what this does is it paints over your drawing. So essentially, you're not, whatever strokes you do aren't going to erase what's at the bottom. Instead, it's added on top of it. So I'm just kind of coloring in her silhouette at the moment. And, we want to fill in all the edges and give it like a nice strong silhouette and shape. I'm even going to color in her earrings now. And I think that the gray is a little dark, so I'm going to click on that layer and then lower the opacity a bit. This is a very quick way to adjust your shadows and your lighting. I like to do that often. And now going back to the outline layer, I'm going to go back and start adding in and painting in those thick cleanup lines again. And now I'm painting in the other eyebrow. I want it to look as symmetrical and expressive as possible. And now I'm going to go in with drawing the outline of the nose. I'm going to give her a very strong V shape almost at the bottom. This is just an indication of where her nose is and where the direction of it is. Notice that there's like a triangle still present in the foundation sketch. Eventually that will be erased and we will just end up seeing that V shape that I had drawn. Using the technique that I had shown earlier, where I use the lasso tool to outline a part of my sketch that I'm not happy with, I want to make her nose a little smaller. So what I did again was I used the lasso tool and I outlined the nose and then press Command or Control T with my keyboard. This brought up the transforms and then I was able to just outline my nose and select the feature that I wanted to reduce or enlarge. And of course, in this case, I reduced the size of the nose. Now that we have done the eyes, nose, and lips, let's just start doing the rest of her outline. I'm going to just start working on the ears and then move on to the neck, her clothing, her hair, etc. Now, to rotate the canvas the way I just did, you can hit R on your keyboard. This brings up a little hand, and you can use that to just rotate around the screen. It's really helpful when you're trying to, draw a line or get to those very hard to reach areas. I'm just drawing some straight lines to try and figure out where, exactly I want my shape to be. Erase and add and really feel out the character during this process. Now, once you've finished doing your outline, with a full opacity brush, let's start coloring in her hair. I want to fill up that entire shape with a nice, thick, full brush. The point of this process is now for us to be able to eliminate our foundation sketch while still keeping that solid form to it. I'm going back to the layer where I had my foundation sketch, and I'm starting to erase out all those rough lines that I had at the bottom. We don't need them anymore, right? Because now that we have our nice bold outlines, we can do to kind of erase out some of that information. Now I want to start adding in a little dimension to our concept sketch. Again on a new layer, and we're going to just label this layer a blue color. I want to add in a little bit of shadow. So the best way to do this is again by creating another multiply layer, and I'm going to lower the opacity just a little so that my brush doesn't have very thick lines. And I'm going to just start giving a little bit of light shading around certain parts of her face that I know would be in shadow and would give a little more dimension to her. I'm clicking again on the foundation sketch and moving her nose up a little. Right now it feels a little bit off. So I'm going to move the foundation sketch and then click on the layer that has the outline and move that as well. And now again, on the top layer that I created, I'm going to just start adding in some more detail and really solidifying this outline. And you can again notice how I'm constantly going back and forth from the foundation sketch to my outline sketch and just erasing and adding and erasing and adding. It's just a process. You're taking away from your foundation and then you're adding stronger, cleaner lines in your outline. So now essentially what I'm doing is going through all my layers and I'm just cleaning up the mess. We want to make sure that our character looks clean but still has that kind of rough style to it. We want it to look like it's, that it's been hand drawn, but we don't want it to look messy, and I think that's an important distinction. So now when I'm painting in the dark and lights of my character, there's something that I want you to think about. It's really important to be able to create a sense of harmony in your concept sketches. You don't want to have one part that is solid and black and then the rest of it just white. You want to have a balance of dark, and light. The reason for this kind of repetition is that it creates a more balanced sketch. So in this case, I'm going to give her a very solid, dark shape for her hair. Then her entire face is going to be light. Then the big necklace on her neck is going to be dark. Then her skin will be light, and then her dress again will be dark. So it's this kind of repetitive yet symmetrical pattern that we're going to use for this character. And this is something that you should pay attention to often when you're doing any kind of sketches. This creates a good sense of balance and harmony in your character and doesn't make one particular side feel too overwhelming or heavy. And so now again, using my thick opacity and flow brush all the way up, I'm going to start coloring in those big shapes. And again, notice how awesome my angled brush is. I can get those nice, very thin lines as I draw horizontally and then get very thick lines as I draw vertically. And you can always adjust this again in the brush properties and just constantly rotate your brush to get this shape. I do that quite often as I'm painting. And now I'm going back down to my foundation layer again, And just let's erase out these lines that are visible on her skin. It looks very messy right now. Since we have our nice bold shape present there, we don't need this information anymore. And now once that you've done more cleaning up, what we can do is now start merging or deleting layers that we don't need. For example, this particular layer over here, we don't need for it to be a separate layer. So I'm going to hit Command or Control E on my keyboard, and this merges the top layer to the bottom layer. Then I'm going to recolor the label and rename this layer. Again, this is all based on your own personal preference. If you choose not to merge these layers, you don't have to. If you feel like your drawing still needs this information, if you feel like later on while you're painting you want to go back and see those sketches again, then by all means leave them. You can also always click on that little eye to the left of your layer, and this will hide your layer as well. If you don't want to see this information, you don't have to merge it or delete it either. Now that I have my sketch at a little more cleaner stage and my layers are also merged and cleaned up a bit, let's go back in there and start adding in that outline and detail again. Just, adding information step by step, not overwhelming or adding too much detail in one place. We want to bring this entire concept together gradually. And this is something I want to emphasize to a lot of artists that start out, the tendency to focus on detail or zooming in too much. I really, want you not to do that. It's always better to work on a wider scale. When I look at the bigger picture, then I don't want to add too much detail if it's not necessary. Now I have decided to erase out the earrings for now. I have an idea of what the shape and the location of these earrings are at, so I'm going to get rid of that. I'm doing this because I really want to clean up my drawing right now, and that very rough shape is kind of coming in the way of that. And I want to make sure that her shoulders look right as well, that her pose is looking correct. Now I think that her hair shape is a little rough and hard, so I'm just going to soften it up a bit. And this is a trick that I like to do that gives the hair that nice sketchy feel. Using your angled brush, I start creating these very light strokes around where her hair is. This kind of creates the impression as though her hair is loosely tied up and has a few, stray hairs going around here and there. It still gives it that sketchy feeling, but it doesn't look messy. Now, using a white brush with the full opacity and flow, I'm on a new layer starting to erase out some of that outline. You don't want to add thick and bold lines all over. It's like picking and choosing your battles. I want the emphasis to be around her jawline, so I'm keeping those thick lines there, but around her ear area where I don't want people to pay too much attention, I've erased out that outline. Or rather, not erased, but cleaned it up with a white colored brush. Now I'm going to duplicate the layer that I was working on and hide the old one because I want to darken my character a bit. I think that she is a little too light now. I want to keep the shadow much darker and it looks a little more graphic. This is the style that I was going for. Now I want to adjust her right eye. I'm going to open up the liquify tool under filter, and using the finger, I'm just going to move her eye to the right a little bit. I think this looks a little better. You can also do this to adjust any parts of your character that you're not happy with. This is a really great tool to use. Now I'm using the same gray color as the skin of my character, and I'm painting out the rough sketches that were underneath her nose. The reason I'm not erasing it is because it'll get rid of all the gray on her skin, and then there'd be a big white patch, right? Because it's on a new layer and the layer below it is white. So therefore I am using the brush tool to paint out these parts. And Then after that, I'm going to go in again and start cleaning up some of the lines. Like I mentioned before, you don't want to have thick lines going all around your character. You want to kind of maintain a balance of thick and thin and back to thick. And, you know, adding thick on the emphasis where maybe her skin would probably have a shadow around that area. That's when I would add a thicker dark line. So now I'm opening up the liquify tool again, and I'm going to just lightly go in there and adjust the shapes of her face. And it's very subtle changes, not too graphic. You know, I'm not really happy with the way her shoulders work, so I'm just kind of adjusting them here and there. And this is a really great way if you're kind of feeling lazy and don't feel like going in there and sketching it out all over again. This is a really simple and faster way to do it. And it's again one of the really cool things about Photoshop. I'm going to clean up the shape around her neck. Right now that perspective doesn't look right. And now I'm just gonna get rid of that thick line on her neck as well. We're just gonna, you know, it doesn't need to be that dark because, you know, it can make our drawing look too heavy. Now I'm going to duplicate this layer because I want to make some changes, and the reason I'm duplicating it is so that if I'm not happy with the changes I made, I can always go back to my previous painting again. You can just replicate a new painting by just dragging that layer down to the new layer icon, and it automatically makes a new one. And now the way I'm going to adjust the lighting again of my character is next to the new layer icon, there is the properties panel, and I'm going to just adjust the levels. You can also do this simply by hitting Command or Control L, but I'm doing it this way because if I'm not happy with the change, I can always hide the layer, you know, so it is, again, gives me a lot more control. Now I'm really just nitpicking at the character. On a new layer, I'm selecting a slightly, you know, lighter brown, and I'm going to go in there and just start painting inside her lips and adding a little dimension bit by bit. This is me doing the fine tuning. If you look in the mirror, you will notice that your top lip is darker than your bottom lip. So right now I'm adding a lighter gray to my character. And now I also want to smooth out and clean up that really rough line underneath her bottom lip. So, you know, I'm using the eyedropper tool. You can do this by selecting Alt or Option on your keyboard, and this creates this little eyedropper tool that you can select the surrounding colors around your painting. So this also prevents me from breaking the flow of, you know, the work I'm doing. So this way I was able to just really clean up her lips and give them that nice shape, and also a little bit of texturing, but not too much yet. Now I'm adjusting my brush again and lowering the opacity and flow just a little because I want to start adding in a little more depth and dimension to my character. To just add a soft shadow around the nose area as well as by the eyes, especially on the bottom lids. And then I also want to do that to the sides of her face. And, you know, make sure that you do this on a multiply layer so that your drawing does not lose any information by painting on top of it. You retain all the information that you have below that layer as well. Again, I'm always adjusting the properties of my brush while I'm painting so that I can give it different textures. You know, I can go with a flatter angled brush or a rounder brush, something with a softer edge to give me all the different you know, styles or different textures that I want to this particular sketch. And I always go back and forth between the eraser and the brush because I'm always adding and then taking away while I paint. Now, this is my favorite part when I do character concepts, is adding in that blush part to my characters, especially my female characters. I feel like it just enhances my character to another level. It just brings a little bit more, you know? And now with a lighter gray color, what I want to do is start adding a little more dimension to my eyes. You know, everything looks really flat right now, so we want to give it that little bit extra that's just gonna take it forward. So just by doing this, I'm able to make my character look a little more interesting as well. I'm also just adding a little thicker eyeliner as well as the highlight to my character. Now I have been working with so many different layers. I think I'm actually confident enough to move on to the next phase of the drawing. What I do is I'm going to do select all and then hit edit copy merged. Then press Command or Control V on your keyboard and paste your image onto a new layer. This is very similar to just, you know, merging all your layers with Command E, but the reason I do this is because I still maintain all the layers that I have below it, and this is again in case I have any mistakes I want to correct. For example, right now I'm adjusting her lips again. Suppose I'm not happy with this, I can always just hide this layer and go back. And now with a nice thick round brush, I'm going to start adding in a little bit of lighting to my character's hair. I'm doing this on a new layer again, and it's with a lighter gray color, and I'm just kind of creating a big shape on where I think that her hair would be. And instantly this gives my character a less graphic shape. And now with my eraser, I'm using a harder edge and I'm going to kind of clean it up. I'm also using a very small thin brush to create like a stylized indication of where her hair is and the direction that it is going in. You know, by just drawing these lines, I've kind of shown that her hair looks like it's tied to the back. It's such a very simple technique that you can do. Now I'm going to add a lighter gray to the center of her lips. Now I just want to add a light shadow underneath her neck. Right now it looks a little unclean. I didn't really clean it up properly, so I'm going to go back in there and paint it in with a darker gray brush. And now that I am pretty happy with the stage that I have brought my concept sketch to, in the next video, what we're going to focus on is adding in the detail and the ornaments. And by ornaments, I mean the little bits of design that will be on the jewelry and her clothing. And this will just elevate my character concept to the next level.